Amid the Seoul-Tokyo trade friction, a growing number of South Koreans, both consumers and shop owners, are beginning to reject Japanese products.
Welcome to Focus, bringing today's news by high schoolers. I am your host, Clara Park. If you haven't noticed over the summer, there has been a recent buzz in Korea with the No Japan Boycott. But what is it exactly? To understand the tension between the two countries, we have to go back in history. The year 1910 marked the start of the Japanese occupation on the Korean peninsula. Millions of men were forcibly enlisted and enslaved as wartime laborers, and tens of thousands of women were forcibly sent to military brothels for Japanese soldiers. These women are also known as comfort women. This went on until the end of World War II in 1945, when Japan withdrew from Korea. In 1965, then-President Park Chung-hee agreed to normalize relations with Japan as Korea was recovering from the Korean War. The Treaty of 1965 signaled restored diplomatic relations between the two countries, while Japan provided 80 million USD in financial help. Then why do tensions still remain in 2019? In the summer of 2013, the Busan High Court and the Seoul High Court ordered Mitsubishi Heavy Industries of Japan and the Nippon Steel and Sumitomo Metal Corporation to pay reparations totaling around 75,000 USD to each Korean forced wartime laborer. Angered by this decision, the Japanese companies countersued, but when Korea's Supreme Court upheld the ruling in October 2018, it angered the Japanese government. When numerous requests from the Japanese government fell onto deaf ears, they responded by removing South Korea from the favored trade partner list, the so-called white list, and putting restrictions on semiconductor exports, which are key to South Korea's manufacturing industry, prompting the movement that we see today. What do APIS students think about the current No Japanese Products boycott? We talked to 3 students about this issue.
Hi, my name is Benjamin and I'm a sophomore at APIS. I don't have any direct experiences, but so when I went to a department store, there was Uniqlo on the basement floor. When I passed by, I couldn't see any customers inside the Uniqlo. So that was pretty interesting because about 2 months prior to that, I actually went to the same department store and it was actually filled with people and they were doing promotions and all that. But after 2 months after we started this No Japan movement, that really changed things a lot.
My name is Justin So, and I'm in 10th grade.
Do you often shop Japanese products, even now?
I have nothing against Japanese people. I have many Japanese friends, but I feel that personally, basically what the Japanese government and what it stands for, I think that when I do have the option of purchasing other products, there's no reason for me to buy Japanese products because basically, in a way, indirectly, I would be making the Japanese government and economy stronger, and that's not necessarily something that I want to actively do when I have other options.
My name is Jin or Moonchild. I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm a rapper, producer, so I just work all over the entertainment business as well as a fashion industry.
How are you personally affected by the movement, or do you have any personal stories?
Well, I've a favorite drink. I haven't drinking it since the movement started. I didn't know first that was a Japanese drink. Now I know I don't drink it anymore.
Only because it's from Japan.
Right. I mean, if it's from Malaysia imported to Japan, Japan imported back to Korea, I would drink it because Japan doesn't have any profit. But it's directly from Japan. They have profit. And because I'm part of the movement, I don't drink it anymore.
Many support the movement wholeheartedly.
Basically, when we boycott or stand up for ourselves, Japan is more likely or more willing to listen to our opinions and more willing to adhere to our expectations on what should be done. So I think that boycotting should continue until we can come to a consensus on what should be done. But I do think that if we want the movement to be successful, it should be done on a greater level and more people should become aware of the situation and participate.
yeah, that's the biggest part. Know the facts, participate if you can, and three, gain more knowledge of it.
But not all are so keen to the idea.
If we look at just the aspect of the traveling, the Koreans stopping the travel to Japan, I think that's a little bit unfair to the Japanese people living there. But when we stop traveling to Japan, the people in Japan that are the most negatively influenced are the people that living outside of the capital. Because Koreans, when we go to trips to Japan, we usually don't go to the capital and those areas. But the thing about those people is that during the Japanese election, those people actually did not vote for Abe.
And this is how Justin responded to Benjamin's concern.
If everyone didn't go to Japan in general from South Korea, then that would still be an effective part of the movement, regardless of which regions they went to, because that would mean that South Koreans are not giving money to the Japanese economy in general. And that's not because South Koreans want Japan to fail, rather that if South Koreans take action, that's just a way of showing Japan that this problem needs to be solved, and this is something that's very serious for South Korea. Ultimately, even if those regions that doesn't support Shinzo Abe loses money, we should still have the movement.
So you're saying it's part of the sacrifice? It's
Yeah.
part of the package deal, I guess.
Right.
There's one thing that they made clear. This issue was not resolved by the 1965 pact.
The grammatical difference from Korean may confuse some people. 배상 and 보상 is different. 배상 is amount compensation. 보상 is compensation reward. And the difference is we are not supposed to get a reward, right? It's an apology. It's supposed to be a amount compensation to fix stuff. But the treaty from 1965, it was like not form of apology. It was like a form of gift.
So I think that firstly, the reparations, although some portions of it may have gone to the family, for the most part, it was like on a government to government level, as in the Japanese government gave money to the South Korean government. I think that's one way of apologizing, but that's not necessarily covering the root of the problem, because the families are the ones who actually deserve the money. When we take into account the situation and the amount of murders and rapes that happened, it's principally unfair for Japan to say that to these South Korean families. And furthermore, the reason why the problem arose in the first place isn't because South Korean citizens want to take off money, like basically steal from the Japanese economy. It's because they feel that they didn't receive what was just in the first place, as in they were never provided money to reprimand for like the countless hours of labor that they had to endure because of Japan without pay. So that just means that injustice still exists.
Japan, in moral terms, they need to apologize more on the comfort of women issues, and they need to try to fix what they did wrong. But in terms of paying us back, I think Japan already did that to us. And even if we do ask them to pay back, I think we should ask the Japanese government, not those companies, because the Japanese government is still not changing their idea that World War II was wrong and they shouldn't have attacked Korea and did all of those things. I think Japan, the government, is the one that has to pay back.
It was interesting to see how all of our interviewees brought up one country in particular as a role model for Japan, Germany.
So in the past, it was all money, right? So maybe, yeah, money does work, but Japan could start recognizing the fact that they killed a lot of people in Korea and they forced them to be in comfort women's or forced labor. Just tells their own people that they did that and tell them that it's wrong those actions were wrong and they're unjustified. If the Japanese government starts telling that to these people, then I think, yeah, that's the best way to fix it. That's like what Germany's doing right now.
For like the problem of the government, as in like it wasn't the current government that invaded South Korea or any of these other countries, I think to a certain extent that's a legitimate claim. But if we were to draw a parallel with Germany and the Nazis, the current government of Germany or governments that didn't participate in the Holocaust basically addressed the global community saying that it's firstly ashamed for the actions of the Nazis and that they bowed down to the Jews who were persecuted by the Nazis. So I think that it's not a legitimate claim to say that just because our ancestors did it, it's not our fault. I think because it was on a country-to-country basis, we can't just say that because the previous government did it, it's not a responsibility now, because the injustice still exists. So whatever method we choose, we should at least try to solve the injustice without just saying it's in the past.
I mean, Germany still has like right wingers, radicals, but still they're trying to get everyone clean about their history, and Japan is not doing the same. So I think Japan has a lot to learn from Germany.
To clarify things, currently, the Japanese social studies curriculum does not teach its students about the atrocities the Japanese imperialism brought to its colonies.
I think when South Korea responded to the movement by coming out with the anti-Japanese products, to a certain extent, that also harmed Japanese economy the way it did for South Korea. So I think that ultimately the purpose of the movement is not to destroy the economies of both countries, but rather find a way to reconcile in a way that still serves justice to South Korea.
How would boycotting mean reconciling though?
So I don't think that boycotting in itself is reconciling, but it's a way of telling Japan that if justice isn't served and if like problems continue to arise like it does in the status quo, I think it's a way of South Koreans showing how they're willing to stand up for themselves now.
While the No Japan boycott continues, a talk between President Moon Jae-in and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is scheduled for December 24th at China's Sichuan province. We've been talking to Justin, Benjamin, and Jen. I highly encourage our listeners to take this podcast as a mere introduction to these deeply rooted issues and to venture out on their own path to seek the truth. Remember, this podcast is just the beginning of the conversation. I think that's pretty good.